A crime in Tokyo. The truth buried in shadows. The lights of the skyscrapers cast long shadows over the bustling streets of Tokyo, where light rain dampened the old sidewalks, reflecting the glow of neon billboards. That night, Alice Fujiwara, a 25-year-old woman, sat in her small apartment in the upscale district of Shibuya, sipping a glass of wine beside her lover, Jack Harrison, a 30-year-old American man working as a financial consultant for a major Japanese company. The atmosphere seemed peaceful, soft music playing in the background, but beneath this tranquility lay a volcano of hidden tensions. A conversation unfolded between them, one that was not their first, but this time it was different. Something was troubling Alice, something she hadn't voiced, but it was evident in her anxious glances and restless movements. She demanded honesty from Jack, but he evaded her questions, claiming that it wasn't the right time for such discussions. The conversation grew heated, and Alice started shouting, accusing him of deceit. Jack looked bewildered, trying to calm her down, but he couldn't stop her from erupting. "Alice, you can't keep acting like this. This is madness," he said, his voice rising. "I don't understand why you keep hiding the truth from me," she shot back, her eyes filled with anger and tears. Then, suddenly, silence fell over the room. Jack left the apartment late that night, carrying his coat under his arm, heading toward the elevator, where the building's security cameras captured his departure. He walked away, unaware that this would be the last time he would see Alice alive. The following morning, a neighbor complained about the blaring sound of the television in Alice's apartment, prompting the building's management to intervene. The security guard knocked on the door several times, but there was no answer. Suspicious, they called the police. Officers arrived within minutes and, after receiving no response, were forced to break down the door. The scene inside was horrifying. Alice lay on the floor, a pool of dried blood beneath her head, her lifeless eyes wide open. Beside her was a gun fitted with a silencer. The clock on the wall read 7 a.m. The television remained on, frozen in time as if it bore witness to the moment of her death. Detective Ryo Takahashi, one of Tokyo's most seasoned homicide investigators, arrived at the crime scene shortly after receiving the call. Known for his impeccable reputation and sharp instincts, he was a man who believed not in coincidences, but in facts and evidence. He surveyed the body briefly before beginning his meticulous examination. There were no signs of forced entry. This meant that Alice either knew her killer or she had taken her own life. However, something felt off. The angle of the gunshot wound was unusual for a suicide. Additionally, while there were traces of gunpowder on her right hand, they were too faint, almost as if someone else had pulled the trigger and then staged the scene to look like a suicide. The investigation officially began, with Jack being brought in for questioning as the last person known to have seen Alice alive. Seated in the dimly lit interrogation room, he faced the scrutinizing eyes of the detectives, who remained skeptical of his innocence. He looked nervous, but firmly denied any involvement in Alice's murder. "I left the apartment after midnight. Alice was fine. I didn't suspect anything," he said, his voice unsteady. "When was the last time you saw her alive?" Takahashi asked. "Around 11:30 p.m. I was in the bathroom, and when I came out, she was sitting on the couch watching TV." But the detective wasn't convinced. Reviewing the security footage again, they found that Jack had left the building at approximately 12:30 a.m., half an hour later than he claimed. Why had he lied about the time? Was he trying to hide something? The autopsy report provided startling revelations. The angle of the gunshot wound was slanted backward, an uncommon trajectory for suicides. Additionally, while traces of gunpowder were found on Alice's right hand, They were far too faint, suggesting that she had not fired the gun herself. More importantly, there was no blood splatter on her hand, indicating that she had not been holding the weapon when the fatal shot was fired. As the investigation deepened, Takahashi began probing Alice's past and discovered that she had been working at a rising tech startup. Just weeks before her death, she had reported a corruption case within the company. Could her murder be connected to this? The team combed through Alice's recent call logs and found that her last phone call had been to an unlisted number. Tracing the number led them to a man named Kazuma Ishikawa, a former business associate of Alice. Summoned for questioning, Kazuma denied any involvement in her death. "Yes, I spoke to her that night, but it was just a work-related call. I wasn't at her apartment. I haven't seen her in weeks," he said, his voice steady. But when detectives confronted him with his fingerprints on Alice's doorknob, his expression changed. He hesitated, his hands trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to kill her," he finally blurted out. "I just wanted to scare her." But things got out of control. Investigations revealed that Alice had uncovered Kazuma's embezzlement of company funds and had threatened to expose him. That night, he had entered her apartment using a spare key he had stolen weeks prior. He carried a gun, not intending to use it, but hoping to intimidate her into silence. When she refused to be threatened and vowed to report him to the police, he panicked. Without thinking, he raised the gun and fired. The sight of her lifeless body sent him into shock. In desperation, he staged the crime scene to make it look like a suicide before fleeing. Upon hearing the confession, Jack broke down in tears. He had spent days fearing that the police would wrongfully accuse him, never imagining that Alice had been caught in a far more sinister web. Kazuma was arrested for premeditated murder, and Jack was finally cleared of suspicion. Weeks later, the case was officially closed, but its impact lingered. Jack stood before Alice's grave, his eyes filled with sorrow, wondering how different things might have been if he had stayed that night. Meanwhile, Detective Takahashi gazed out over the city, certain that more crimes lay in wait, their secrets hidden in the shadows, waiting for him to uncover them. But the questions didn't end there. Had Kazuma acted alone, or had someone coerced him into silencing Alice? And if so, why hadn't he tried to flee after committing the crime? There were still loose ends, buried truths that Alice had taken with her to the grave, secrets that perhaps would never be uncovered.